we're going to dive into what's going on with Apple and privacy. I've always been, the torchbearer for privacy and promoting great policies. And at the start of the year, they promoted something that would stop apps tracking you on their devices. They copped a lot of flack from especially companies like Facebook, who said this is going to ruin their business model. And it seems that they have now actually walked that back substantially. So Apple is now allowing app developers to collect data from its 1 billion iPhone users for targeted advertising. And they have acknowledged this shift. It's a much looser interpretation of their initial policy, where they said, we're going to give users control to decide whether or not they want to be tracked, which I think is pretty reasonable. Facebook didn't think it was so reasonable. So the compromise that they've reached is they said, well, you can collect data, but only if it's all aggregated, if it's all anonymized. You're not allowed specific data about users. You're not allowed to use that in like any personally identifiable information. And the companies will take a pledge in order to it shows how they're going to run things. Okay, so the companies, like Facebook is relying on a pledge from these companies that they will only look at user level data once it's been anonymized, but we have no access to how these companies this data. We have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Users are going to have no idea whether their data privacy has been preserved. And we're basically trusting these third-party data harvesting companies to promise not to abuse their power, which is crazy to me. I don't know about what you guys think, but this is so far removed from the Apple that I used to promote as a privacy preserving product. They did so many awesome things for privacy, and it just seems like they're compromising. And, I'll dive into some of about the compromise later, but I want to sort of throw to the group to start off with. David, what's your thought on what's going on with Apple?
I think this is supposed to be a family-friendly show, so I'll just say this is BS. It's incredibly disappointing. And you mentioned Facebook revenues. For people who haven't been paying attention, we actually did see huge hits to Facebook and Snapchat and a few other tracking companies' revenues after iPhones made this change. So you can only assume that that Cook is getting some pushback from his buddies in Silicon Valley, and that this was something of a product of that. And it's just complete deception by Apple at this point that they have rolled out this huge privacy improvement, and then they just pulled it back, basically, because, as you said, there's no way to enforce that they're actually anonymizing this data when it goes to companies like Facebook. They're just using a black box and saying that they're doing it. If Apple was anonymizing this data itself somehow, that would probably introduce even other security risks. So I don't know. But at this point, it's just a complete shortcut. Seems lazy, seems compromised. Do not like, I guess, is all I'll say. Jen, you had something to add.
I also do not like this story was so troubling to read this morning. And so basically personal data and device information is still being tracked. The companies are meant to take a pledge. It sounded very Boy Scouts-like to me. We are pledging our honor and we are going to follow this. And you just need to trust that we're going to...
The very honorable people at Facebook.
Exactly. Yeah. It was very troubling to read. But at the same time, I think as we move from the way that we currently operate in the internet into, what everyone is calling Web3, there are a lot of startups and a lot of really smart people who are working on ways to actually protect your data and to actually anonymize your data and for people to actually have ownership over their data. And it will be interesting to see how companies like Apple and Facebook and Snap interact with those startups. I think we're really going to start to see the true colors of these big giants. And I hope eventually they will be overthrown. But Naomi.
It's also important to keep in mind that Android didn't even have these tracking warnings to begin with. So Apple is still trying to do things better than a lot of these other companies are. They're going beyond, they're at least pushing the envelope and pushing the conversation in the right direction. Other company like Google isn't even going there. They're like, nah, you just track what you want. And also Chrome, we're going to keep allowing third-party trackers for a really long time, even after all other browsers have gotten rid of them. So, it just goes to speak to the giant market around data right now. So Apple said that they had to stand back from a strict reading of its rules because the disruption to the mobile ads ecosystem would be too great. What they're essentially saying is every app you have on your phone is harvesting giant amounts of data. And if, they do anything to compromise this basically like shuts down an entire ecosystem. So people should be aware every time they download an app, read the permissions, see what data you're actually handing over, see what permissions you're actually giving away on your phone. A lot of the time they won't even talk about like what specific data you're handing over. So just be really aware of that, of how much information, personally identifiable information about yourself you're putting out there every time you download a new app. And just to wrap up this segment, so their change makes their tracking policy functionally useless. Stopping third-party tracking functionally useless.